Good morning. My name is Cindy Flores. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I've been trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction. I am doing this series of recordings on mindfulness during the pandemic through the collaboration of Friends Life Care Partners and White Horse Village. Today, I'd like to speak about mindfulness in isolation. I felt that was appropriate because that's exactly what we're going through in this moment as I am making this recording. Never in my lifetime do I remember a time where so many people are not only choosing to be in isolation, but are being required to be in isolation. And this is new for a lot of us. And what I'm learning as a therapist and working with clients in a virtual way is that it's impacting people on many different levels. And so I'd like to speak a little bit about how mindfulness might be able to help you through this time. And not only through this time, any other time that you feel isolated. Because even though we're in physical isolation, there are people in this world all the time who would be experiencing something more like emotional isolation. Maybe they're not in contact with their loved ones, or maybe there's something going on that is keeping them from communicating and feeling included in society. So, though this is very appropriate for this time, and we all could benefit from mindfulness in this time, it's also useful on all the times going forward once we get through this pandemic. If you had listened to the introduction, I introduced that there were 7 attitudinal foundations with mindfulness. And each session, I plan to introduce one and expand on it. For today, it's beginner's mind. And as we go through this session, I'll explain a little bit more what that means. However, I'd like to start with why some people are experiencing more distress in isolation than others. Obviously, there's several reasons, but there's one underlying reason. And I just want to bring this forward so that you can assess which category you fit in so that it might help you understand if you are possibly feeling fine about this isolation or in great distress. And that is that we tend to fall in one of two categories. Either we're an introvert or we're an extrovert. And most people think that introverts are shy and extroverts are outgoing. However, that's really not the case. Often, introverts will be a little shyer and extroverts will be a little more outgoing or appear that way. But the true definition is an introvert gains energy, regains and recharges by being alone, where an extrovert recharges and gains energy by being with others. So there's a natural divide here. When I work with clients virtually, obviously, who are introverts, they're managing much better overall than those who are extroverts, because there's a part of them that has an appreciation for being able and being required to be alone. But then there's the extroverts who are almost starving emotionally for contact with others. And what I have noticed and what is starting to be reported to me by these clients is that the coping skills that they have learned that are healthy, for instance, going out to the gym and exercising, or meeting up with friends in groups, those have been taken away from them temporarily. And several of them are reporting that they're slipping back into old behaviors, such as perhaps binge eating or drinking. And I realized that there needs to be new coping skills that they can embrace that doesn't require them to go out their doors, since that's being recommended that they stay home. they've done interviews with people who have had to stay in isolation because of their careers, such as astronauts. And they've been asked to give tips of what helps them when they're in extended times of physical isolation. And what they have said was that one, they reframe it. Instead of looking at all the things that they're missing out on or the things that they can't do, they look at it as a way of reframing their priority as themselves and their environment. Perhaps working on themselves by reading more or by meditating more, or perhaps just organizing an environment that has been neglected because they've been so busy out and about doing their life in a different way. They also encourage people to keep a routine. When we're in isolation, it seems like the routine of life is so different, but that doesn't mean we can't put some things in place that appear like a schedule or a routine. For instance, waking up at the same time every day, or having meals at the same time, creating a time when maybe you do FaceTime or some kind of interaction with friends and family so that everybody knows that, for instance, 6:30 at night is the time that everyone's available to do FaceTime. They also recommend that you avoid being obsessing over the news. Because if you watch the news over and over again and you hear the counts and you hear the negative reports, it can be overwhelming. And what we take in mind-wise, it's like junk food if it's negative. Okay, we know that if we overdose ourselves on junk food, we will not feel well over time, or maybe even immediately after the meal. If you overdose yourself in negative stories about the coronavirus, for instance, you too will start to deplete yourself. And if we deplete ourselves mentally and emotionally, it lowers our immune system. Studies have definitely shown that our immune system is closely linked to our thoughts and our well-being. So I really encourage you not to overdose. Obviously you want to be informed. Obviously, caring about what's happening to others outside is part of compassion and empathy. But those who watch hour after hour hearing almost the same information all day long are really doing some harm to their mental capacity. They talk about something in our bodies called telomeres, and the ends of those telomeres help to create a level of youth, so that therefore youth is not necessarily a chronological age. It's how well we've taken care of our bodies. And if we are inundating ourselves with stressful information, what we are doing is starting to chip away at those telomeres, and we can literally feel older and more distressed very quickly when we allow information to start chipping away at the telomeres. However, the opposite is true with mindfulness. They have done studies, and those who quiet the mind or do some mindful exercises, whether it's meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, whatever that might be, the telomeres actually start to expand. And so, though we may not chronologically, our age may not change, the way we feel inside can change, and it can change rather quickly. Study was done, and it shows that in 8 weeks, a major difference can occur. So I encourage you now to look at that and say, what am I feeding my mind? Am I obsessing on all the negative? Or am I tuning into some of the positive? Because there are reports of the best of humanity out there, the way people are putting their lives on the line to help those who are ill. There are those who are out there who are contributing by giving money to have masks made or food delivered. And this is the best of humanity. And so if you really expose yourself to those stories, that's actually helpful. But I mentioned beginner's mind, and I'd like to take a minute to explain what I'm I mean by that? In mindfulness, beginner's mind is when you look at something that you've looked at over and over again, but you see it through a new lens. If you've ever taken a child to the beach for the first time, or someplace that can be exciting but has become commonplace to you, you'll see that the awe and the wonder through that child, the amazement of seeing the waves for the first time or shells on the beach, you can feel that yourself, that sense of, wow, it's brand new. Well, we can do that in this pandemic. We can look at life and say, what are we learning through this? What will we learn and take forward when this is over? I was talking to one client. I work with a lot of teenage clients as well, high school students. And there was one boy who's 16. And he said to me about a week ago, you know me and I'm on the go. I go from school and then I leave and I go to one friend's house and another friend's house and I do this activity and that activity. I do everything to avoid being home. And now I'm required to not only do school at home, but stay at home. And he said, I could be distressed by that. But he said, I started to put a routine together. I'm able to sleep a little bit later. I don't have to be at school at 7:15. So I'm able to get a better night's sleep. And then when I get up, I meditate and then I do exercises. And he says, I haven't felt this good in a long time. And he hit the head of all of this. In other words, you can choose new activities, new things that are stimulating to the mind, to the emotions in this time. If you have a puzzle in the closet that you've never opened and you say, I've never taken the time or interest to do it, this is an excellent time to do it. Not only is it something productive and keeping you busy, but just using your mind in that way creates new, what we call neural connections. In other words, it is actually building new brain cells. Or reading that book that you've never had the time to read, or ordering a book that someone has recommended that you've never taken the time to order. It could be anything. If you're able to get out and about in your environment, it could be as simple as, and I'm very mindful, to be with the earth, to plant things, or to just be in the soil at this time, if that's a possibility and of interest to you. Even something as ordinary as doing the dishes can be a mindful activity if you're really present, if you're really aware of the soapiness of the water, of the feel of the water on your hands, the satisfaction perhaps of actually cleaning the plate or taking the time to really dry it. These are all mindful activities that over time, if you do this on a daily basis, will strengthen your brain. And it's been proven that areas of the brain that grow when you do these types of activities, whether they're formal meditations or informal activities that you do in a very mindful way, all of these things actually help develop the brain in the areas of decision making, problem solving, memory, peace, and joy. So though you may never have put a priority on these activities, and you may be one of those people who just feels valuable when you're out and about and with other people, especially if you're an extrovert, know that you are really nourishing your body by doing these mindful activities while in isolation. But even moving forward, there are going to be mindful activities that you can do that you've learned during this time of isolation. One thing that has been has come into my awareness is this is an opportunity for generations to come together. I've had to depend on the younger generations to help me with technology. I have learned more technology in the last 3 weeks than I have probably learned over all of my generation, all of my decades of life. And there's been a need. I've avoided it in the past because I haven't needed it and it just didn't feel like I could make space to learn it. But in this time of need, I have learned it. And that education has come from mainly people under the age of 30. Not always, I'm not saying, but they have grown up with it. It's their language. However, people over 50 know what it's like to not be addicted to their technology. We remember a time when the TV turned off for the night, when stores closed and they weren't 24/7, or on Sundays when only the deli was open. And we have an opportunity, those of us who are over 50 or 60 on up, to perhaps teach younger people how to entertain and appreciate the present moment when you don't have all of the activities that might be common for them. Yes, they are keeping up with their friends virtually through FaceTime and other things, but they do still feel housebound. And for those of you who are comfortable with posting or getting information out or have grandchildren, um, you can share your experiences with when you were a child. What comes up for me and what I've taught my younger clients, the ones I've been able to go into their home environment, is we'll go out and we'll look at the clouds and we'll make, in our imagination, what does that cloud look like? And then moment to moment, as the cloud shifts, what does it look like now? That is a very mindful game that we did naturally as kids, but is a lost art to our younger generation. So, in this time of isolation, it's very, very important that we touch base with what's going on with us in the present moment, that we're aware of our thoughts, that we're aware of our emotions or the sensations in our body. And I'd like to share a meditation with you now that does just that, because one exercise of mindfulness based stress reduction is about helping us focus and stay focused on one thing. However, the other part of MBSR is learning how to turn away from thoughts or emotions that are not serving us well. So I'd like to do a short meditation with you. It's a sitting meditation. However, I'd like to take a moment to read a quote that perhaps you can use as part of this meditation. And it comes from the Buddha. And Buddha says, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." And this is the perfect time to remember that. If you look outside of yourself, if you're watching the news, there isn't much peace. But doing what we're going to be doing now is helping to develop inward peace. That's lasting peace. Everything external is subject to change. However, inside, we can develop a very peaceful center. So for this meditation, I ask you to sit upright so that your head and your spine are aligned. I invite you to close your eyes. If that's not comfortable for you, then just kind of gently take a gaze down, not really looking at any one particular thing. And take a deep breath in and a slow breath out. And just continue with this type of breathing for a few more breaths. In meditation, we call the breath the anchor of the practice. So we'll start with the sensations in the body associated with the breath. So on the next breath in, notice the sensation as you fill your lungs with air and how the sensation shifts as you exhale. I invite you to choose another area of the body to see what it feels like, the sensation of the body in breathing. perhaps your nose, your mouth, wherever air is entering. Feel the sensation of the breath as you breathe in and then breathe out. When you bring your awareness to this area of the body, you've released the sensation of what it feels like at the lungs. This represents being able to shift a focus away from one idea or sensation to another, because mindfulness is about choice. If you notice now that your mind is caught up in thought, I invite you to think of a cloud and putting that thought on a cloud and watching that cloud drift away in your mind's eye, taking that thought with it, and then gently bringing it back to the sensation of the breath. If you notice an emotion or a sensation that is uncomfortable for you keeps coming into your awareness, I encourage you to take note of that. Don't dismiss it, but at the same time, just choose to do your best to shift awareness back to the breath. If that uncomfortable sensation would require just a little shifting of your body position, then you can take one of two options. You can come back to the breath and see if you can breathe through that sensation, or you can make a gentle shift in position to relieve that physical sensation. Again, mindfulness is not about making everything better. It is about being aware what we are entertaining in our mind or feeling in our bodies, and then choosing what we can change and releasing those things that we cannot. The more you practice this sitting meditation, the more you'll be able to do this in your day-to-day life. And so I invite you to take 2 more deep breaths in and out at a pace that is comfortable for you. When you've completed the second breath, open your eyes, check in with your body and see how you're feeling in this moment. Many people will feel a little calmer, or they'll feel maybe even a little bit tired. This can be a very good exercise to do before you go to bed at night, because it does relax. What we have just done is an exercise that has activated the vagus nerve, which then triggers our relaxation response to go into action, and it lowers our fight and flight. And as I'm sure you're all aware, our system of fight or flight has been activated almost 24/7 for some of us, for a lot of us. This activity can give you a little break from that. So any way that you can release that sense of stress in this time of isolation, or even moving forward when you're feeling emotionally isolated perhaps, there will be benefit in this. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. I will be back to do another session. But until then, I will say goodbye. Be well.